The air that night was unusually still. The city lights blinked faintly through the mist, as if nature itself sensed that something tragic was about to unfold. Far away, amidst the glow of a movie set, Xiao Zhan's laughter echoed through the air, completely unaware that miles away, something was happening that would change everything. For the fans who followed every heartbeat of the untamed stars, that night would go down as one of the most unforgettable moments in entertainment history. But what no one knew then, what Xiao Zhan himself didn't know, was that Wang Yibo, his co-star, his friend, his silent confidant, was in the middle of a life-threatening accident. The world would later see Xiao Zhan's shocked expression, his trembling hands, his tearful silence. But at that moment, he was blissfully unaware, his world still filled with laughter, camera flashes, and dreams. The night began like any other. Xiao Zhan was on set, rehearsing a few scenes for a drama. The crew admired his dedication. Every gesture, every glance, every line he spoke carried that quiet intensity he was known for. "Perfect take," the director said, smiling proudly. Xiao Zhan nodded politely, ever humble, brushing off the praise. Little did he know, at that same exact time, Wang Yibo's motorbike skidded on a slick curve, the sound of metal clashing against asphalt echoing into the night. The accident was violent, sudden, and devastating. While the world outside spiraled into chaos, Xiao Zhan's world was still calm, a fragile piece moments away from being shattered. Hours passed before the news started spreading like wildfire. The staff's phones began buzzing quietly at first, whispers spreading among the makeup artists and lighting crew. "Did you hear about it?" someone murmured, their voice trembling. "Wang Yibo, there's been an accident." But nobody dared tell Xiao Zhan yet. Not immediately. He was still filming, completely focused, unaware that his best friend was lying in a hospital room surrounded by doctors and flashing lights. Back on set, the rain started to fall, a light drizzle that glistened under the spotlights. Xiao Zhan stood there, lost in character, his eyes reflecting the same emotions that, unbeknownst to him, mirrored the real pain of the night. When the director finally called for a break, Xiao Zhan walked over to the side, sipping warm tea, chatting casually with the crew. He laughed. He joked. He scrolled through his phone, replying to fans' messages with that gentle smile everyone adored. Then his assistant approached, face pale, hands trembling. "Zhanji." The words barely came out. "There's been an accident." At first, Xiao Zhan didn't understand. His brow furrowed slightly. "What accident?" The assistant hesitated. "It's Yibo." Everything stopped. The teacup in his hand almost slipped. The chatter around him faded into a suffocating silence. The music playing in the background seemed to vanish. For a second, Xiao Zhan couldn't even breathe. "What do you mean?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "What do you mean, Yibo?" When the assistant showed him the breaking news alert, Xiao Zhan's eyes darted across the words, each one slicing deeper into his chest. "Wang Yibo involved in serious accident, condition unknown." He stood there frozen. For a moment, time stood still. Then, with trembling hands, he grabbed his jacket and rushed out. "No, it can't be him," he kept muttering. "It can't be Yibo." The drive to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights, honking cars, and whispered prayers. Xiao Zhan's heart pounded so violently that he could hear it in his ears. Every memory of Wang Yibo, their shared laughter, their behind-the-scenes moments, their quiet companionship, flashed before him like scenes from a film he never wanted to end. When he arrived at the hospital, the chaos was unbearable. Reporters crowded outside, cameras flashing. The fans who had already gathered were crying, holding signs, praying out loud. "Is it true? Is he alive? How bad is it?" Xiao Zhan didn't answer. He just pushed through the crowd, his eyes wide and red, ignoring the flashes and questions. Inside, the smell of antiseptic filled the air. Nurses rushed past. Doctors whispered urgently. And in the middle of it all, Xiao Zhan stood there, trembling, his breath shallow. When he finally caught sight of Wang Yibo, pale, motionless, hooked up to machines, his knees almost gave out. He moved closer, hands shaking, whispering Yibo's name under his breath. "Yibo, what did you do? Why didn't you tell me? Why weren't you careful?" Tears streamed down his face uncontrollably. The strong, composed Xiao Zhan that fans saw on screen was gone. In his place was a man whose world had just cracked open. The doctors spoke softly, explaining Yibo's condition. Xiao Zhan barely heard them. All he could focus on was the faint rise and fall of Yibo's chest. He was alive, but barely. The next few hours were a blur. Xiao Zhan refused to leave his side. He sat there in silence, holding Yibo's hand, whispering words no one else could hear. "You still owe me a race, you idiot," he said through tears. "You promised we'd go for coffee after filming. You said we'd laugh about old times. Don't break your promise now." Outside, the world was already reacting. Social media exploded. Millions of fans prayed together. Hashtags filled every feed. #pray for Wang Yibo. #stay strong Xiao Zhan. #untamed brothers forever. As the hours turned into dawn, Xiao Zhan remained by the bedside, still in shock that he hadn't known. The guilt tore through him. He kept thinking, how could I not have felt it? Why wasn't I there? Later, when Wang Yibo's condition stabilized, Xiao Zhan finally breathed, but the pain didn't fade. Even as he smiled faintly when the doctor said Yibo would recover, there was a shadow behind his eyes. For days after, Xiao Zhan avoided the press. He didn't post. He didn't speak. His fans noticed the silence. When he finally appeared, his face was thinner, his smile softer, but his eyes carried a weight that words couldn't hide. In an interview weeks later, when asked about the incident, Xiao Zhan paused. His fingers tightened around the microphone. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "That's the part that hurts the most. I didn't know he was in danger until it was almost too late." The room went silent. The journalist lowered her pen. Even the cameras stopped clicking for a second. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly. When you care about someone deeply, you think you'll always know when something's wrong. But life doesn't work that way. That night, I was laughing while he was fighting for his life. That's something I'll never forget. Fans around the world cried reading those words. The sincerity, the heartbreak, the bond between the two stars, so deep, so real, reminded everyone that beyond fame, beyond the spotlight, there were just two human beings connected by something profound. When Wang Yibo finally woke up, his first words were barely audible. But Xiao Zhan understood. "You came," Yibo whispered weakly. Xiao Zhan smiled through tears. "Of course I did. Where else would I be?" Their hands clasped, and for a brief moment, the chaos of the outside world disappeared. It was just them again, two souls bound by fate, friendship, and everything they had endured together. Later, as Yibo recovered, Xiao Zhan stayed close, helping him through therapy sessions, cracking quiet jokes to lift his spirits, always pretending to be strong even when he wasn't. The media called it brotherhood, but those who truly watched could see. It was something deeper, something that didn't need a name. Months later, when the two finally appeared together in public again, fans went wild. The cheers were deafening, the energy electric. But those who looked closely could see the emotion in Xiao Zhan's eyes, the same look of gratitude, fear, and relief that had haunted him since that night. He smiled at Yibo, and Yibo smiled back. No words needed, because now, they both knew the value of every moment, every breath, every bond. The accident had changed everything, not just for them, but for everyone who had ever believed in their story. And though Xiao Zhan hadn't known at first, once he did, he never left his side again. That was the moment fans around the world realized. Real connections don't need cameras, scripts, or applause. Sometimes, the most powerful stories are the ones that happen when no one is watching. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more heart-stirring stories about Xiao Zhan, Wang Yibo, and the emotional realities behind their fame. The quiet hum of the hospital corridor echoed like a haunting melody. The scent of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, and under the cold fluorescent lights, Xiao Zhan sat motionless, still replaying the moment he first heard the words, "Yibo's been in an accident." It felt unreal. Just hours before, He had been laughing on set, surrounded by bright lights and music, unaware that somewhere, his closest friend was fighting for his life. The weight of not knowing, the guilt of being absent, it all crashed down on him like a tidal wave. His fingers trembled as he clutched his phone. Messages from fans and friends kept flooding in. Questions, prayers, breaking news headlines, but none of it mattered. He wasn't the celebrity right now. He wasn't the polished, smiling Xiao Zhan from interviews. He was just a man desperate for answers. Why didn't I feel it? He whispered to himself. Why didn't I know? The door to the emergency room swung open briefly, and for a moment, he caught a glimpse of Wang Yibo, unconscious, pale, his face covered in cuts. Machines beat steadily beside him. Xiao Zhan's heart clenched. He pressed a hand against the cold wall for support. Every memory they shared flooded his mind. Yibo's playful smirk on set, his laughter when they teased each other, the way he always brushed off compliments with that quiet humility. And now, silence. A nurse gently touched his shoulder. "Sir, please wait outside." He nodded numbly, his throat tight. He sat down again, his gaze fixed on the closed doors ahead. The ticking of the wall clock became unbearable. Each second felt like an eternity. His mind wouldn't stop torturing him with the same thought. I didn't know. I should have known. In that moment, the mighty Xiao Zhan looked small, fragile, and utterly human. His manager arrived, trying to comfort him. "John, you couldn't have known. It happened so suddenly. You were on set. There's nothing you could have done." But Xiao Zhan shook his head. "No, Yibo's my brother. I should have been there." He wiped his tears with trembling hands, but they just kept falling. When the doctor finally stepped out, everyone froze. Xiao Zhan rushed to him, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Is he okay? Please, tell me he's okay." The doctor's tone was calm but firm. "He's stable for now. He suffered multiple bruises, a concussion, but is going to need rest. Is a strong one." The relief that washed over Xiao Zhan was indescribable. He exhaled shakily, covering his face with both hands as tears streamed down once more. The same hands that had performed countless roles now trembled from raw emotion. "Is strong," Xiao Zhan repeated under his breath. "Yeah, that's a bore." He waited for hours until he was finally allowed to see him. The room was dimly lit, the soft hum of the machines the only sound. Wang Yibo lay there, breathing slowly, eyes still closed. Xiao Zhan stepped closer, each step feeling heavier than the last. He stood by the bed, his voice low but filled with emotion. "Yibo, it's me," he whispered. "You scared me, you idiot." He pulled up a chair and sat beside him, never taking his eyes off him. He wanted to speak, but the lump in his throat was too heavy. Instead, he just sat there in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of Yibo's heartbeat. A few times, nurses came in and out, but Xiao Zhan didn't move. He didn't even check his phone anymore. The outside world could wait. Right now, all that mattered was here. At one point, he leaned forward, gently brushing Yibo's hair away from his forehead. "You promised we'd go for coffee after the shoot," he murmured, smiling weakly through tears. "You can't back out now, all right." His voice cracked, but he didn't care. The emotions that had been bottled up for so long finally poured out. The weight of not knowing had been unbearable, but the guilt of knowing too late, that was even worse. As dawn began to break, the sunlight filtered softly through the hospital blinds, illuminating the two of them. Xiao Zhan's eyes were red and swollen, his clothes wrinkled, but he stayed right there, watching, waiting, praying. When Wang Yibo finally stirred slightly, Xiao Zhan's heart leapt. He leaned forward instantly, voice trembling. "Yibo, hey, it's me. Can you hear me?" Yibo's eyelids fluttered, and though his voice was faint, it was enough to break the tension that had filled the room for hours. "You came," Yibo whispered. Xiao Zhan's lips trembled into a shaky smile. "Of course, I did. Where else would I go?" For the first time in hours, a soft laugh escaped his lips, a fragile, broken laugh that carried both relief and pain. He reached out and held Yibo's hand tightly. "You have no idea how scared I was," he said softly. "You really don't." The bond between them, once built through scripts, rehearsals, and shared stages, had now become something unshakable. A bond carved by fear, hope, and the pain of almost losing someone you can't imagine life without. In the days that followed, Xiao Zhan rarely left the hospital. The press waited outside, fans flooded social media with messages of love and concern. But Xiao Zhan kept to himself. Every time someone told him to rest, he simply shook his head. "I'll rest when he wakes up fully," he'd say. "Until then, I'm staying." He'd bring flowers every morning, sit by the bedside, and read Yibo's favorite lines from scripts or hum the songs they used to sing backstage. It wasn't for the cameras, it wasn't for the headlines. It was simply because he needed to be there. One night, as Yibo finally regained some strength, he looked at Xiao Zhan and smirked weakly. "You look terrible," he teased. Xiao Zhan chuckled softly, his eyes glistening. "Yeah, well, blame you for that." The room filled with a quiet warmth again, the kind that only comes when you realize just how fragile life is and how precious the people in it truly are. Later, when Xiao Zhan stepped outside to get some air, he looked up at the night sky. The city was quiet. The same stars that once watched them on stage together now blinked softly above, as if sharing their silent gratitude. He whispered, almost to himself, "I didn't know that night, but now I do. And I'll never take it for granted again." That was the moment everything changed for him. The fame, the awards, the noise, all of it meant nothing compared to one simple truth. Real connections are rare, and when you have them, you protect them with everything you have. Fans around the world would never forget how Xiao Zhan reacted, how genuine his care was. That story became a reminder that behind the cameras and fame, there are hearts that truly feel, break, and heal. And so, the legend of that night, the night Xiao Zhan didn't know, became more than a story. It became a symbol of loyalty, friendship, and unspoken love between two souls who shared a journey no one else could understand. If you felt the emotion of this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more deeply emotional and powerful stories about Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo.